It has been well over a year, some might say a year and a half, since my last video. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jordan. I make book videos. I made 4, and then I disappeared. But that's because I, A, graduated college, and B, work. I have 2 jobs. I work at libraries now, and I am working on studying to be a librarian. I have been meaning to get back to making videos. I really like watching monthly wrap-ups, so why not just do it for the love of the game? I really felt like talking about what I read in May. I also want to add, I have been reading a lot of books for kids aged like 8 to 12, so like middle grade books. That's because I work with kids a lot now, and I like to be up to date on what they're reading. So I'll be including those in my wrap-ups. I'll try not to talk super long about them because they're probably not what my main audience is meant to be. They are still fun. You can still learn a lot from those kinds of books. In my last 4 videos, I did a checkout check thing where I talked about what books I had checked out from the library. Instead of that, what I want to do is what I'm currently reading. I'm always reading more than one book because I'm a mood reader and I can never decide exactly what to read, but I want to highlight what I'm focusing on the most right now. That is Moderation by Elaine Castillo, and I got a signed copy of this book from the author, so I am trying to prioritize finishing it, and maybe it'll be mentioned in my June wrap-up. As of now, that's a little teaser into what I'm reading. The first book I finished in May was Vesuvius by Cass Bean. This was an audiobook narrated by the author, Amin El-Gamal and Max Mayers. That's right. I also do audiobooks now. It was also a really long audiobook, maybe too long. I was feeling kind of crazy towards the end of it. I did enjoy my time with this book though. It follows 2 young men living in Pompeii, Felix and Lauren. Felix is a classic thief and he has a suspicious memory loss past, and when he steals the helmet of Hermes, which is this very famous artifact, shit hits the fan in Pompeii. Crosses paths with Lauren, who is a temple trainee of the goddess Isis, and they begrudgingly work together to try and restore order. But there's also all these earthquakes happening, and I mean, obviously we know what happens in Pompeii, but they don't know that yet, and so to them it seems like the world is ending, and possibly they had something to do with it. Also, Lauren has been having prophetic visions of Felix destroying the city for years of his life, and then he sees the real Felix show up in his temple, and he's like, oh my gosh. I felt like the romance between the 2 was a bit lacking, but if you were to approach this as more of an action-based plot, I think it works perfectly fine. It was still a really solid read. The highlight of it was absolutely the Roman politics for me. I love books set in ancient Rome, really any period of ancient Rome. The political scheming. I think this book did scheming really well. Yeah, I'd never heard of this before, but I really love a random YA surprise. Next, and be prepared, there's a lot of whiplash in this because I am reading just the most random books at all time for the sake of not burning out, just reading whatever I want. Finished the first book in the 7th time loop, The Villainess Enjoys a Carefree Life Married to Her Worst Enemy manga. That's the full title. I won't be repeating it. Do we really need that long of a title? Anyway, I heard about this series just from like a list about top like YA manga, and I was like, okay. It really doesn't take that much to convince me or influence me to read a book. I really do think a light manga like this is such a treat to read between books about space operas or people trying to kill each other or really heavy literary fiction. I ended up reading all 7 books of this series this month. I don't have a lot to say about them. They were enjoyable. It follows a girl who keeps getting reincarnated, dying at the age of 21. So she's been reinventing herself in each life so far as a knight, a maid, an apothecary, nobility. Current life, the emperor that killed her in her 6th life proposes to her. So in her 7th life, she's betrothed to someone who just killed her in her mind, and she's trying to figure out how she can kind of change the destiny of the people around her so that maybe this time she'll survive. And her main goal is she wants to live a life where she can just do nothing all day and chill, which relatable. I had a bit of a giggle fest reading this. I really did enjoy it, and because it's YA, it is clean. I liked that because one thing that does regularly deter me from consuming more manga and anime is just the amount of sexualization. Like, I really don't need to be seeing all that, and there really isn't any of that in this series, as it's meant for teenagers, so I did enjoy that. After that, I read Peak, which is not the title. It's called The Lies of the Ajengo by Moses Ose Utomi. Wow. I really love tiny books, even when I feel sad that they were so small and I couldn't spend more time in them. This is maybe my favorite tiny book of the year so far. This follows a young man living in his really small community who is all dying of thirst, and they've been searching for water for decades, centuries, I can't remember exactly, but a really, really long time. And the famed Ajungo warrior empire has been keeping his people in an oppressive, weakened tribute state situation for that amount of time. After reaching the age of 13, all members of his community get their tongues cut off, and in a really cruel trade situation, his people are given just enough water to survive in exchange for their tongues. What the Ajungo people do with their tongues, we don't know. If you read it, you'll find out. Even though other young adults have died in their quest for water, Tutu, our main character, commits to the mission anyway. He still has his tongue, he's almost 13, and he sets out across the desert. He meets some really interesting mentors along the way and learns about the other communities living in the desert and what they might all have in common. The conclusion and twist of historical lies and manipulation was decadent. I was making real world connections. I was so sat up and so locked in reading this. There is a sequel and I will be reading it, but honestly, I think I'm going to save it for exactly when I need it. My review for this on Goodreads is just wow. Easiest 5 stars of the month. It was incredible, and I think I read it in almost a single sitting. That's how good it was. Next, I read The Antiquarian's Object of Desire by India Holton. It was a very random find for me. I was just bored at work looking up books. Part of a semi-connected series, but I checked and it wasn't the kind where the other books were required reading. Followed 2 antiquarian historians in a magical Victorian England, Amelia and Caleb. They were childhood friends, but their friendship became scandalous as they became adults because man and woman being friend is deeply harmful to society, and especially in their academic setting, it was very problematic for their careers. So to protect their careers, they've been pretending to hate each other and have an academic rivalry for years. I have to compliment this book for that twist of the enemies to rivals / childhood friends to lovers dynamic. I think it was done pretty well. I haven't read a book with this kind of exact romance plot set up before. You applaud that. It was very cheeky. I was disappointed by the lack of magic in this. If I had to explain it in a sentence, it's like random items like watches and pens float in the air like they're possessed and then explode. And then the main characters have to like catalog them and research them. That's it. At least that's as far as this book went in the series. I wasn't impressed with that. I was kind of bored by that execution. Overall, the romance was also pretty meh. I don't think I need to read more of this specific world. I got what I needed from India Holton. Maybe this wasn't the best book of hers to read, but I don't know. Oh well, it was fine. A drastically different change of pace, like I warned earlier. Next, I read Small Boat by Vincent Delacroix, translated from the French by Helen Stevenson. This was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2021. It's a fictionalized rendition of the events of November 2021, in which tens of migrant boats set out across the English Channel, and then the coastal rescue crews in France greatly failed in the attempts to save their lives. The introduction at the front of this book is semi-required context, I think, in that it explains a lot of the background, and I was only semi-familiar with the event beforehand, so it was definitely important to read that. I did rate this book kind of low on my reading tracker because the writing was too endless flow of thoughts for me. We mainly follow one of the French coastal rescue staff whose morals, or lack thereof, more accurately, make it incredibly hard to be in her head. She is responsible for 27 deaths that occurred that night, and the audio of her speaking to the refugees with basically zero human compassion, emotion, or urgency has destroyed her reputation. She basically showed no sign of caring about them dying. She's getting questioned by her superiors for the majority of this book. You cannot skip over a single sentence. You will get really, really lost. It is pure stream of consciousness from the inside of her head. Both thematically difficult to read, but also technically difficult on a prose level. Obviously, this is a really important story that is basically identical to the real events. It's only barely fictionalized, and I would recommend it for that reason. It shows some pretty horrible sides of humanity, and I do wish I liked the actual writing more, but I'm certainly not mad that I did read it. Next up, I read Mad Wife by Megan Church. Genuinely so not my usual cup of tea, which probably explains a good amount of why I wasn't super impressed with it. I mainly picked it up because I've been seeing some buzz about it and it was just available at the library the other day. Picked it up because I thought just why not? Give it credit though, I finished it the day I checked it out, which never happens. So that is praise because I normally will drop books as soon as my time is disrespected and I lose interest. That's why most of the books I do finish I rate pretty highly because books that I don't like, I just don't finish. Anyway, we follow Lulu, your typical 1950s housewife, as she navigates a young marriage, motherhood, and the oppression that is standing at the door with a hot dinner, with your lipstick on when your husband gets home, that kind of thing. I mostly didn't enjoy this book because it honestly just pissed me off that was so many people's lived experiences. I don't know how valid of a reason that is. It's hard to read. It's frustrating to read. I feel like other things I'd read before, for the most part, it didn't feel that original. Lulu starts to go crazy. And if you ever read a book with the wife go crazy plotline, I'm sure you can guess the context and or the twist given the time period. I did guess all this for the most part. I was honestly really let down with what ended up happening, and overall, if I could go back, I just wouldn't pick it up again. If you've never read a book with this kind of plot, maybe you'd like it. Writing was really accessible. I did tear through it in like 3 hours. It did end up kind of being a hate read, which is like finishing a book even though you're just pissed off by it. Sometimes you need those, because then that means the next book you read will probably be really good. Next is the first middle grade book of this list. This is a graphic novel called We Are Big Time by Hina Khan and illustrated by Safia Zerogi. I finished this super quick before bed one night and I went to sleep so heartwarmed. It was so lovely. We follow a group of female high school basketball players who attend an Islamic school in Wisconsin. I really liked how the story navigated the question of representation, especially whether a team of all hijab-wearing players are defining what it means to be a modern Muslim girl in the world of sport, how the broader national mission of representation is deeply important, also secondary to the lived experiences of individuals. The girls are interviewed by local and eventually national news about their experiences as basketball players, and they all notice things like being asked about wearing the hijab, whether their family supports them, etc. But they bring the conversation back to basketball and their personal identities and balance the line between I am more than my identity and representing my identity. I think this was really well done. All the non-Muslim characters were really great too. I think this should totally have a sequel. I'm hoping it does. The art was lovely. I was more impressed than usual. Side note for all my fellow liberal arts degrees havers, reading middle grade is so much fun. Noticing themes and how those themes can be communicated to younger readers is a really fun brain exercise. I highly recommend it. Next, I finished another audiobook. This was The Second Death of Locke by V.L. Bovalino, narrated by Sarah McLaren. First of all, I have to say that this audiobook was absolutely divine and certainly contributed to my enjoyment of the book, and that is heavily due to the narrator. She was excellent. We follow Gray Flynn, who is both a well, capital W, a human source of power for her mage, and a hand, capital H, second in command to her mage, Kier, short for Kiernan. Side note, I was thinking of Kier, the cult leader from the show Severance, the whole time, and it was kind of hard to separate the two. But when she said Kiernan, it helped. They've been on battlefields together for over a decade at this point. They are very close. They're deeply connected to each other, both magically and emotionally. You might see where this is going. Kier and Gray take on a top-secret mission to transport a young girl across the continent who is supposedly the lost heir daughter of Locke, the island that controls the continent's magic that disappeared 16 years ago. Except this cannot be true, because Gray is the lost heir of Locke. This is information freely accessible in the description of the book. I just didn't know that, because I didn't read the description of the book when I checked the book out. This read like a plot twist to me. I'm letting you know that it's not, so don't worry. A lot of politicking and warfare, which I loved, and a very interesting magic system. Kier, in particular, wields Gray's power in the form of controlling the muscle of people's hearts, literally able to stop the beating within with just a tug on the tether that's between them. There's a lot of discussion of the tether itself. It's interesting to an extent. Also a lot of interesting stuff about why their particular bond is so strong, and I will say it's not of the soulmate variety. I find to be a very yawn reasoning in fantasy for people being connected. Like, find something more interesting than soulmates, please. The side characters and backgrounds were also incredible. The central plot takes place across a month or so. It feels like you've been with the characters for so much longer because of how the backstory and information is covered. Sure, it's maybe a little info dumpy at times, but I'd argue it's necessary for you to understand what's happening in the story. I highly, highly recommend this one. Probably my second favorite of the month after The Lies of the Ajungo. Maybe they're equal because they're very different. One is quite long and an audiobook, and one is very, very short and not an audiobook. There's 2 other books planned in this series. Based on the description for the one that comes out in September, which I will absolutely be reading, it's a standalone following 2 different characters in the series that we haven't met in this book. So it'll be interesting to see if the series just is a standalone kind of series. Next, I read another middle grade book. This is Finding Lost by Holly Goldberg Sloan. She's a very big and well-known author, so it's not surprising to say that this was a very well-executed coming-of-age novel. It was pretty simple, but to my delight, a lot of it took place on the Oregon coast and my alma mater, which I highly related to and really enjoyed reading all the things mentioning places I've been before, kind of using my own memories to inform everything I was reading, so that was fun. That's kind of all I have to say about it. Last book that I finished in May was Not Here to Be Liked by Michelle Kwok. It's a contemporary YA novel following a half-Chinese, half-Vietnamese girl living in Irvine, California, named Eliza, whose singular goal in high school is to become editor-in-chief of her school's newspaper, The Bugle. On literally the day of the election for the editor-in-chief, a boy named Len decides to join the race, and with a passionate speech, wins the vote. Never mind that Eliza is far more experienced for the role, has written longer for the newspaper. She's convinced that Len's sudden win is rooted in misogyny, so she writes a manifesto of sorts that gets accidentally exposed to the school. I mean, as she was writing it, I had a feeling this is going to be exposed at some point, and I mean, of course I was right. She gets treated terribly by her classmates as a result, but once more of the popular girls adopt her message of feminism, and it is more earnest than I'm making it sound, it's actually pretty great the way it comes across. The school changes its tune. Eliza is directed to co-write with Len as a punishment of sorts from the principal, which is where the whole romance, them getting closer stuff takes place. Honestly, yes, there is a significant amount dedicated to them getting closer, but I feel like the foundation was well done before there was romance involved. I could read them as friends or close friends. Also, relatively high stakes involved. If the school, aka the social media of the students at the school, finds out that she's involved with a guy she claimed was the face of the patriarchy, then she just looks like a hypocrite. I appreciated all the discussion on feminism, especially how high schoolers view it. I found myself sighing and shaking my head a few times because teenage naivete strongly informs every character's personal politics. I remember feeling and thinking exactly that way when I was that age. The side characters and Len were also well developed, honestly, a bit more than Eliza, but I enjoyed this book for the subject matter and the boldness to have a main character who genuinely is not there to be liked by her peers and do whatever she believes is necessary to achieve her goals. A lot of books these days are marketed as having unlikable narrators that are girl failures and they're a whole mess, and I don't feel like you see that a lot with YA. I liked how this was executed here because at the end of the day, she's just a high schooler trying her best, and a lot of valuable lessons that I think make sense for her character. Those are all 10 of the books that I read in May. Technically 16 because I read all 7 books of that manga series. If you enjoyed this video or you think any of these books sounds up your alley, please leave a like on the video. 1 like equals 1 pen floating in the air and then exploding, and then that being the entirety of a magic system. So leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more videos from me, and yeah, I'll see you next time.